Beamy 32, work in logistics, pretty normal life, married to Tanya for about 4 years. She's great in a lot of ways, but she has this one thing: she's completely absorbed by online pop psychology. Every week, there's a new buzzword she picked up from some influencer. One week, it's emotional labor. The next, it's holding space. Then it's weaponized incompetence. My entire existence seems to be a case study for her pet theories. I'm a pretty quiet guy by nature. Not because I'm angry or depressed. That's just how I'm wired if there's a problem. I think about it, figure out a solution, and then I act. I don't see the point in sitting around for hours talking about how a problem feels. To Tanya, this is a critical character flaw. It's evidence of my toxic masculinity and emotional stunting. Our evenings have developed a certain pattern. She'll come home from her marketing job, visibly upset about something I'll be making dinner or relaxing after my own day. She'll launch into a long circular story about some minor workplace drama, like her manager, Brenda, used a slightly condescending tone in an email, or her coworker, Jessica, got credit for a project Tanya felt she contributed more to. I'll listen patiently, nod in all the right places. I've learned that offering a solution is the absolute worst thing you can do. One night, a few months back, she was going on about Brenda again, something about scheduling and how Brenda didn't respect her time outside of work. It was a 20-minute monologue about a single email exchange. When she finally paused to take a breath, I made a mistake. I said, "Why don't you just block off your calendar for an hour after 5 p.m., set it to busy? That way, she can't book meetings then?" A simple, practical solution to the stated problem. Her face just fell. Her expression went from agitated to deeply disappointed. She sighed and said she didn't know why she even bothered talking to me. I wasn't listening. I was problem-solving, apparently. What she needed was for me to validate her feelings and sit with her in her frustration. She told me that my immediate jump to a solution was a defense mechanism, a way for me to avoid engaging with actual human emotion. I just stood there, holding a spatula over a frying pan, and took it. What else can you do? Arguing would just lead to another lecture about how men get defensive when their emotional shortcomings are pointed out. So I just said, "You're right, I'm sorry," and went back to cooking dinner in silence. This sort of thing happened constantly. If the dishwasher broke, I'd have it taken apart with tools on the floor. Within 10 minutes, she'd come in and say it was amazing how I could connect with a machine, but not with my own wife. If she was stressed about money, I'd create a spreadsheet to track our spending and find areas to save that was seen as me being controlling and dismissive of her financial anxiety. Every practical action was reinterpreted as an emotional failure. It was exhausting. I started feeling like I was living with a therapist who had already decided on my diagnosis. The pressure for me to open up became her main project. She would try to set up these special nights for it. "Let's have a vulnerability evening," she'd suggest. It sounded like a nightmare. Me, sitting on the couch under interrogation, being forced to talk about my deepest fears and childhood wounds. I always found a way to deflect or change the subject. I'd suggest a movie, or say I had a headache, or bring up a household chore that needed doing. This only made her more determined. She told her friends about it. I could hear her on the phone sometimes from the other room. Her voice would get low and serious. "He's just a vault. I can't get him to open up. I'm trying so hard to create a safe space for him, but it's like he doesn't want to be helped." Her friend would murmur something on the other end, probably agreeing wholeheartedly. I wasn't a vault. I was just a private person. I process things internally. I don't feel the need to broadcast every worry or sad thought that passes through my head to me. That's strength and self-reliance to her. It was a pathology. The breaking point came on a Friday night. Sometime in late spring, I think she had planned one of her ambushes. But this one was more elaborate. Candles were lit. She had on soft music. A bottle of expensive wine was open on the coffee table. I knew the second I walked in the door that this was it. There was no escaping tonight. We sat down and she started her spiel. She held my hand and looked at me with these big, earnest eyes. She told me she loved me, but that she felt a distance between us, a wall that I had put up. She said she couldn't be in a marriage where she didn't truly know her partner, that she wanted to know everything. The good and the bad she promised she wouldn't judge. That this was a space of pure acceptance. I tried to tell her, gently, that I was fine, that I was happy, that my past was my past, and that I preferred to live in the present that just made her start to cry. The tears came, right on schedule. She said I didn't trust her, that my refusal to be vulnerable was a sign that I didn't see her as a true partner, that I was shutting her out, and it was the most painful thing in the world for her. I looked at her, crying, and I just felt tired, so incredibly tired of the fight, tired of being analyzed, tired of being treated like a broken appliance that needed fixing. And a part of me, a small, stupid part, thought maybe she was right. Maybe if I just gave her what she wanted, this would all stop. Maybe if I showed her the ugliest thing in my past, she would finally understand and leave it alone. So I made the single biggest mistake of my life. I decided to open up. I took a deep breath and started to talk. I told her I wasn't always this quiet, that, in my early 20s, I was the opposite, very trusting, very open, saw the best in everyone I told her, about my best friend. From back then, we'll call him Dave, not his real name. Dave and I were inseparable. We'd known each other since we were kids. We did everything together. He was basically my brother after college. We decided to start a business. It was a small IT consulting firm. I was the tech guy, the one who built the systems and did the actual work. Dave was the charismatic one, the sales guy, the one who handled the clients and the finances. It was my dream. We poured everything we had into it. I worked 80, sometimes 100 hours a week. I slept on a mattress in the tiny office we rented. I put all my savings into it, took out loans for 3 years. That business was my entire life, and it was working. We were slowly getting bigger clients, building a good reputation. We were finally at the point where we were about to become properly profitable. We landed a huge contract, our biggest one yet. It was enough to finally move into a real office, hire our first employee, and start paying ourselves a decent salary. The first payment from that client came through, a massive wire transfer. It hit our business account on a Thursday. I remember being so excited. Dave and I went out for a cheap dinner to celebrate, talking about the future. He seemed a little off, a bit quiet, but I figured he was just tired like I was the next morning. I went to the office. Dave wasn't there, which was weird. He was always the first one in. I tried calling him. His phone went straight to voicemail. I logged into our online banking portal to pay a few vendor bills. The account was empty. Every single penny, including the huge new deposit, was gone, transferred out at 2 a.m. to an offshore account. I just stared at the screen. I didn't understand at first. I thought it was a bank error, a hack, anything. But the truth, I spent the whole day frantically calling the bank, calling Dave, trying to figure out what was happening. By the end of the day, the reality started to sink in. Dave had been planning this for months. He had set up the offshore account. He had waited for the big payday. He cleaned us out and vanished. He didn't just take the money. He left me with all the debt, the office lease, the equipment loans, the outstanding bills from our suppliers. All of it was in my name as well as his. He was gone, and I was left holding the bag for everything. I never heard from him again. I lost everything overnight. My business, my savings, my dream, and my best friend. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute. It was like it broke something inside me. The next 2 years of my life were a living hell. I was being sued by creditors. I had to declare bankruptcy. I moved back into my parents' basement. Because I couldn't afford rent, I worked 2 full-time manual labor jobs just to start paying off the personal debts that bankruptcy didn't cover. I was deeply, profoundly depressed. I didn't trust anyone. I barely spoke. I just worked, ate, slept, and tried to forget that the person I trusted most in the world had systematically destroyed my life for money. It took me years to climb out of that hole, years of just grinding, keeping my head down, speaking to no one, trusting no one. That's where I learned that talking about your problems doesn't solve them. Working in silence does. That's where I learned that showing your vulnerability is like showing a predator where to bite. When I finished the story, the room was silent, except for the soft music still playing in the background. It was the most I had said about it to anyone, ever. I had just handed my wife the broken, bleeding core of my past. I felt completely exposed, raw. I looked at her, waiting for the hug, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." The comfort she had promised. I waited for the safe space to materialize. Tanya was quiet for a long time, just swirling the wine in her glass. Her expression wasn't one of sympathy, it was analytical, like she was a doctor listening to a patient's symptoms before making a diagnosis. Then she finally spoke. Her first words were, "Wow, that's a lot to hold on to." Not, "That's terrible." Not, "How did you survive?" Just an observation, like I was a piece of data. Then she continued, "From a psychological perspective, holding on to that much anger and resentment for someone for so long is really just hurting you." I didn't say anything I couldn't. She leaned forward, putting on her best therapy voice. "You need to work on forgiveness, Ken. Not for him, but for yourself. It's the only way you can truly let go of that trauma." I just stared at her. It felt like I was watching a stranger. She wasn't done yet. "And honestly," she said, taking a sip of wine, "there must have been signs. People don't just snap like that. It sounds like there might have been some codependency issues in your friendship. Were you overlooking red flags because you were too invested in the business?" She was dissecting my personal catastrophe. Like it was a chapter in a textbook, she was looking for ways I was at fault, ways that I had contributed to my own destruction, and then she delivered the final blow, the one that would echo in my head for weeks. She looked at me with an almost triumphant expression, as if she had just proven her grand theory. "You see? This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is what happens when men aren't in touch with their emotions. If you had been more emotionally aware back then, you would have probably sensed that he was pulling away or that something was wrong. Your inability to connect on an emotional level made you blind to the danger you were in." She said it. She actually used the worst, most painful event of my entire life. As evidence to win an argument, she weaponized my trauma against me. 5 minutes after I had shared it with her, something inside me just went cold. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was the quiet, calm, and final click of a heavy steel door shutting and locking for good. I had shown her my wound, and she had immediately poured salt in it, while telling me it was my fault for getting hurt. In the first place, I stood up slowly. She looked at me, confused. "Where are you going?" "We're having a breakthrough." I didn't look at her. I just said, "I think I understand now. Thank you." I went into our bedroom and closed the door. I didn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would never, ever make that mistake again. The next morning, I woke up before she did and went about my routine. As usual, I made coffee, got ready for work, and left the house. I didn't say goodbye when I came home that evening. She tried to act like everything was normal, but there was an awkwardness in the air. She had probably replayed the conversation in her head and realized she might have overstepped, or maybe one of her articles told her to give me space after an emotional release. Whatever the reason, she was more subdued. She asked about my day. I gave one-word answers. Fine. Okay. I wasn't being rude or aggressive. It was a complete lack of energy, a total absence of engagement. It was like talking to a polite customer service bot. I was present physically, but my mind was 1,000 miles away. She seemed to notice the shift, but didn't know how to address it. The old Tanya would have immediately launched into a critique of my communication style. This new, more cautious Tanya just let it go. This new dynamic continued for the next few weeks. Our conversations became purely logistical. Did you take out the trash? We're out of milk. My car's making a weird noise. I would handle whatever needed handling. I took out the trash, I bought milk, I took her car to the mechanic and got it fixed. I was a perfect, functioning cohabitant, but the husband she knew was gone. The warmth, the quiet affection, the small jokes, the man who would listen to her work stories for hours, all of that had vanished. It was replaced by this calm, efficient, and completely detached stranger. She started trying to get the old me back. She would suggest date nights, try to initiate those deep talks again. I would agree to go out to dinner, but I'd be silent through most of it, offering nothing of myself. When she would try to ask me how I was really feeling, I would just look at her and say, "I'm fine, Tanya." The phrase, "I'm fine," became an impenetrable wall. She couldn't get past it, and it drove her crazy. She could see in my eyes that I wasn't fine, but she had lost the key to that part of me forever, and I think she was starting to realize it. She tried a different tactic. Apology. One evening, she sat me down and said she was sorry for how she reacted that night. She said she was trying to process it from an intellectual place instead of an emotional one, that she didn't mean to sound like she was blaming me. I just nodded. "Okay," I said. "I appreciate the apology." And that was it. No absolution, no, "It's okay, I forgive you." Just a flat, factual acknowledgement. It was like she was apologizing to a brick wall. Her frustration grew. With each passing day, I could feel her watching me, trying to figure me out, trying to find a crack in the new facade. There were no cracks. The structure was solid, built from the hard lessons she herself had taught me. The real test came about a month after my confession. It was a Tuesday. I think I got a call from her in the middle of the workday. She was sobbing so hard, I could barely understand her through the tears. I pieced together what had happened. There had been a major restructuring at her company. Her whole department was eliminated. She, Brenda, Jessica, all of them were laid off. Effective, immediately, they had been called into a conference room, given the news, and told to pack their desks. Her job was her identity. She loved the creativity, the prestige, the social aspect of it. She had built her whole sense of self-worth around her career, and now, in the space of a 15-minute meeting, it was gone. She was hysterical, utterly devastated. "Can you come home?" she cried into the phone. "Please, I need you." I told my boss I had a family emergency and left the whole drive home. I felt nothing, not a shred of pity or sympathy. All I could think about was the irony the universe has a sick sense of humor when I walked in the door. She was a complete wreck. She was sitting on the floor in the living room, surrounded by the contents of her office box. Her makeup was smeared all over her face. She was still in her work clothes. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, expecting me to rush over and hold her, expecting me to be her rock, her emotional support system. I walked over, looked down at her and the box of her belongings. I didn't kneel down. I didn't offer a hand. I didn't say a word of comfort. I just stood there, looking at her with that same blank, neutral expression she had seen so much of lately. She stared back, her sobs starting to quiet down, confusion replacing her desperation. "Ken," she whispered, "aren't you going to say anything?" I took a moment. Then I spoke in a calm, level voice. "This is bad," I said, "but you're a skilled marketer. You'll find a new job." That was it. No hug, no, "We'll get through this together." No, "I'm so sorry, baby." Just a cold, practical assessment of the situation. A solution, the exact same thing I used to do. The thing she had trained me out of, the thing she had despised as emotionally stunted. I had given her back exactly what she had given me. A dismissive, analytical response to genuine pain. Her jaw dropped. She looked at me as if I'd just slapped her. "That's it?" she said, her voice rising with disbelief. "That's all you have to say to me? I just lost my job. My whole world is falling apart, and you're talking about finding a new one?" I didn't engage. I just turned and walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. She followed me, her shock turning to rage. "What is wrong with you?" she screamed. "I'm having the worst day of my life, and you're acting like a complete stranger. I need my husband right now. Where are you?" I took a slow sip of water and looked at her over the rim of the glass. "Panicking won't help the situation," I said calmly. "The logical first step is to update your resume and start looking at job postings. Wasting energy on being upset is inefficient." I was using her own pseudo-intellectual, detached language against her. I was holding up a perfect mirror to her behavior that night, and the reflection was horrifying to her, but she didn't see it as a mirror. She just saw it as cruelty. She completely fell apart. She started screaming, throwing things. A decorative bowl on the counter smashed against the floor. She accused me of being a monster, a sociopath, of never having loved her. She said I was punishing her, that I was being vindictive and cruel throughout all of this. I remained perfectly calm. Her emotional storm broke against my silence and had no effect. I was an immovable object. When she finally exhausted herself and collapsed into a sobbing heap on the kitchen floor, I just stepped around her. I went into my home office, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and started working on a project I had brought home with me. I tuned her out completely. I effectively ceased to exist for her in that moment. The rest of the evening passed in a tense, heavy silence. She stayed in the living room. I stayed in the office when I finally came out to go to bed. She was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring blankly at the dark TV screen. She looked at me as I passed, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and desperate confusion. "Why are you doing this to me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. I stopped in the doorway and looked back at her. I considered, for a moment, explaining it to her. I considered saying, "This is what you wanted. This is what it feels like when your deepest pain is met with cold analysis. This is the safe space you created." But I knew it would be pointless. She wouldn't get it. She would just see it as me, making her tragedy all about myself. Her worldview didn't allow for the possibility that she was the one in the wrong. So I just said, "I'm not doing anything, Tanya. I'm just being practical." And I went to bed. I slept perfectly that night for the first time in a long time. I felt a sense of peace. It was a cold and lonely peace, but it was peace nonetheless. The wall inside me was now complete, and nothing could ever get through it again. I had finally learned the lesson that my old friend taught me all those years ago, but this time it was my own wife who had been the teacher. Never show your weakness. Never open the door, because people won't come in to help you. They'll just come in to see what they can take, or how they can use your pain to prove their own point. I don't know what will happen with our marriage. Maybe she'll leave. Maybe we'll continue on as two roommates sharing a mortgage. Honestly, I don't really care either way. The part of me that would have cared is gone for good. She wanted me to open up and show her what was inside. I did. And now she's horrified by the emptiness she finds there. She sits alone in the living room most nights now, crying quietly, and sometimes she'll ask me, her voice trembling, how I can be so cold, how I can be so unfeeling. She still, to this day, has absolutely no idea that she's the one who killed the man she misses.